Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and The Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by James, who's an intermediate photographer. We're obviously going to look at it inside of Photoshop. The backstory on this one is that James said he had a birthday party for his sister-in-law. He cooked most of the day, had a few minutes to come out with his Nikon D200 and pop-up flash, take a few grab shots. This is one of them. Says he shot this with a 70-200 f2.8 zoom at 200 millimeters. So with the crop factor, this becomes a very long focal length, close to 300 millimeters. Shot this at f3.5 at a 60th of a second in RAW, then took the RAW file, processed that, took it into Lightroom and finished processing. One of the things that I like right away about this image is the fact that even though this background looks pretty close and there's a lot going on back there, there's some nice separation because of the long focal length here and the wide open aperture, creating a shallow depth of field. Something else that I'm enjoying in the image is even though James shot this with an effective focal length of 300 millimeters and his shutter speed wasn't that fast, a 60th of a second. If he was shooting handheld here, then the pop-up flash to me is doing a couple of things for him. The duration of flash is very short, let's say an average of somewhere around a 1500th of a second. If you do a pretty good job of hand holding, that pop of light that's very short can essentially become a shutter speed or a second shutter. And that duration of the light, particularly if this is sort of a darker area of the room, can help you hand hold at slower shutter speeds. The classic would be with this kind of focal length, you really need to be at around a 500th of the lens or faster to hand hold and get a sharp picture. So just something to think about hand holding and flash. The other thing that I'll say about the pop-up flash is, another thing I like about this shot is how much light James has poured into the eyes here on the portrait subject. This gesture is really nice for kind of an event style picture. A lot of times those shots can start to look very much the same with people sort of looking right into the camera and mugging for the camera. And this seems a little bit more like a stolen moment that's a little bit more editorial or documentary, where she's maybe thinking about something. There's a real peaceful look in the eyes. The eyes are a big part of this expression, and getting the light in there is really helping. And I also like the fact that there's some exciting color up here that can also help to keep my mind on the portrait subject, even though there's quite a bit going on in the background. I'm enjoying that part of it. And I like the dynamic placement here. I like, with a rectangular framing, getting the portrait subject a little bit out of the middle and having a little bit more negative space on one side or the other of the portrait subject, particularly with her looking in this direction. I think that works pretty well too. When I think about perfect world improvement for this image, I want to just show you something real quick. It's a tool that I use all the time in Photoshop. It's rescaling, and I use it to correct all kinds of things. I also use it to enhance. In this case, I'm going to make this image bigger. We have an issue where the glasses are essentially creating a distortion right here, and I just want to show you a quick way to correct this using rescaling. I'm going to duplicate the layer on a Mac, Apple J, PC, Control J, and then I'm going to go to the polygonal lasso. I'm going to make a rough selection here. I'm just going to come over here, something like this. This is the real important part of this selection. I'm going to come way out here into the hair, and I am going to do that because I'm going to take this selection right here, again, Apple J or Control J, to put that selection up on its own layer. There it is. And I'm going to rescale that. I'm going to push it back in so that I can line this up with the rest of the face. And if I just come around the glasses themselves, when I push in on the duplicated layer, the old layer of glasses will all of a sudden pop out from behind there, and I'll have to deal with that. By making a bigger selection and creating this zone out in here, where even when I rescale the top information, what's underneath it will be similar. It'll be very easy to blend those two layers. So now with this layer active, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and I'm going to take that layer and push it in until it can match up with the rest of the face below. I'm going to add a mask to this. I'm then going to make black my foreground color, push B to get the brush tool, and I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of a harder brush than I do for painting on masks typically, because I'm just cleaning up the edge of a mask here, so around 40%. And now I'm going to go to 100% opacity on the brush by hitting 0 on the keyboard, and I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller. And then I'm just going to come in and I'm going to paint on the mask and clean up the edge of it, and voila, I've got everything matching up there by just using a little bit of rescaling in the shot. And we could go into 100%, and there's a few other things that we might do here to sort of make it perfect. There's a little bit of duplication out in here that we could deal with very easily, very quickly, but that gives you the basic gist of that correction. I also, if I'm worried about the eye getting rescaled, I could have made the selection on the other side of the eye and taken that into consideration, but hopefully that gives you a tool that can help you do all kinds of things. Now let's go away from that picture, and then let's go over to a picture where I have, let's see which one it is here. There it is, where I've made a lot more changes to the image, and we're going to back out of all of those changes and I'll walk you through them. Once I got to this sort of corrected distortion version, one of the things I'd like to do is make her come forward a little bit more in the image. And one of the new cool things in Photoshop, in addition to this drawer for your adjustment layers, and the fact that they pop up in this area and don't get in your way, if we go to hue saturation, and some of the other adjustment layers have this too, there's some really cool presets that can speed up our workflow. And I just used a preset here called Old Style, which is a desaturation. Makes this thing look like we shot it on, I don't know, MPS negative film, or one of the old Kodak negative films that's sort of undersaturated. And I did that. Let's throw that away to create that feeling right there. And I did that on this layer, and then you can see my mask here. I just applied the change to the background, and you can see how we can use color just like we use flow of focus, just like we use lighting. We can use flow of color to make one idea come forward more than the other. The next thing that I did was I came in and I added more local contrast to the hair. I'm trying to create contrast there so that the hair becomes a framing, and it's a visual stop that keeps all of that contrast and the foliage and everything that's on the wall from being the next thing that you get to. I'm trying to frame the main subject, the face, in a way that slows you down visually. The next thing that I did was just a little bit of overall darkening, particularly in those areas in the background that are more flesh toned so that they don't harmonize quite so much with the face and pull you back there. The next thing that I did was add a little bit more saturation to the lips and eyes to bring that forward. I did a little bit of whitening there on the teeth, maybe a little bit too much. Now that I'm looking at that, let's turn that down a little bit. And then the last thing that I did was added even a little bit more low end into the hair. All these things just designed to make the portrait subject come forward. And there's where we started, and without that rescaling, and there's where we ended up. You know, one of the things I want to say here at the end is this is essentially event photography, even if it's a private party. Very, very, very difficult. One of the hardest gigs in photography because you just don't have much control. And I think that James has done a really great job here of capturing an expression that seems authentic, creating separation to begin with in a difficult situation where she's close to a pretty busy background, getting really nice light into the eyes. And we want to thank James for submitting this image to the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.